Music.
Definitely does a lot more than just music. What it does is educate people, and if we can do it in an enjoyable way, all the better. And what I mentioned to you earlier is that this coming year, I would like what we do is to show how black music has influenced popular music.
Well, seems pretty interesting to me.
I think it should be. What I'm trying to do at the moment is trying to get people who can do something towards it interested in it. It isn't that easy, but I'll do it.
Well, I'll butt in at that point. Remember when we were having a talk about modern music and where it all came from, and I told you about blues and folk music?
Yeah.
And how well you think blues music came from the black population in America.
Yeah.
It's what they brought with them from Africa, really. It was that style of music. And that's what when we talk about popular music, it's really mainly the blues, but with a fusion of some of the European folk history in it as well. And so really, popular music wouldn't, as we know it, wouldn't have happened without the influence of the African music coming through into American and European culture. So you might find that interesting. Yes, definitely.
Yeah, I probably will.
What about asking some questions about Tom's life in Swindon, Luke?
Yeah. So how was your life in Swindon?
Well, life in Swindon.
Yeah.
Yeah. As I said, I was in the RAF.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a son and a daughter in Swindon. And after the RAF, I went into the civil service for a while, then left, and I've worked a lot in the voluntary field. Immediately after I left the civil service, immediately after the civil service, I started a group, I started a charity, which is SPACE, Swindon Project for AIDS Counselling and Education.
Mm-hmm.
And I ran that for 6 years.
Okay.
At the end of that, I personally was suffering both mentally and physically.
Okay.
And took a year out under duvet. What do I mean by that? I shut myself off for a year, until I got through that, and then started working with people with learning difficulties. I worked with people with living difficulties for a few years, and I used stories with them in developing, their understanding there, and not their understanding really, but I will explain more. I worked with the men to give them a male perspective of life, what is expected of men generally. And I also worked with the black people who were in the group to give them a black perspective on life, because the majority of them were either in white homes or had white parents, adoptive parents, and therefore didn't know what it was to be black. So I gave a black perspective again to them. And when I was leaving, I told them that, because in fact I retired a couple of years late because I wanted to continue what I was doing. But when I was leaving, I told them that in fact I would be becoming a storyteller. So they gave me a quilt, made a quilt for me, a story quilt, which I have developed more since. But I did go on to tell stories.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Do you
That's
have,
my life in Swindon.
sounds like a very interesting life. Do you have any other talents other than storytelling, say writing?
I have kind of written my story. I have been interviewed several times about my story, my life story, but I've not. In fact, I'm dyslexic,
Okay.
so I would have a whole lot of difficulty writing a book.
Mm.
But as you hear, I've got very little difficulty speaking.